You ever feel like you just got kicked in the balls and then slapped in the face and then kicked in the balls again? Well, that's exactly what Blake Treinen felt on June 29th, 2017. At least I would assume. Someone who wasn't having a good year at that point anyway, as a reliever for the Nationals, and only continued that in the ninth inning on this day, as he'd blow a 2-run ninth inning lead to the Cubs. All 3 runs coming with 2 outs, and I mean, it seemed like the stuff was there for Treinen. Like, look at this pitch, the 99-mile-an-hour two-seam slash sinker falling away that Russell wasn't even close to touching. That's nasty, but the other hitters kept making contact, mostly good contact. It led to those 3 runs and boosted Treinen's ERA on the year to over 6. And despite throwing 3 scoreless innings in 3 separate outings after this, the Nats were ready to move on from Treinen, a guy who had been with them for 4 seasons up until that point. And it's crazy because he was pretty damn good in the 3 seasons before 2017, especially in the very year before. Treinen was great in 2016. He wasn't a strikeout guy really at all, even though he threw really hard, but he was still really effective for the Nats. But 2017 was ugly. Very ugly. And a couple weeks into July, he was traded to Oakland where he finished strong. And that's something the A's have banked on for years, getting overlooked players and turning them into impact players. And the A's weren't very good in 2017. They finished in dead last place in their division, but the way his season ended was at least one promising thing. And it turns out it ended up being one of many, as the A's won 97 games the next year. But with Blake Treinen specifically, after such a mess of a year in Washington, D.C., the man went out and completely saved his career. How? By putting up a historic season. Like, he was borderline perfect. He struck more people out than ever before, by a lot, too. Now, it's not like Treinen was ever that prone to giving up home runs, but he only gave up 2 of them the entire year, just 7 runs the entire year. His ERA was .78, and not only was he disgusting, but he also had the ability to get more than 3 outs in multiple innings if needed, and as a result, he threw over 80 of them that year, which of course helps out all of his other fellow bullpen mates. Without him, there's a damn good chance the A's don't make the postseason that year. I mean, he literally finished top 6 in Cy Young voting and top 15 in MVP voting. It really doesn't get much better than how Blake Treinen was in 2018. And as you can see, I mean, just look at all this. Look at all these pitches. His stuff was just ridiculous. Just like it was even with the Nationals, but he found full control and feel of his pitches now. He wasn't really leaving anything out over the plate, and as a result, this led Treinen to become the first pitcher in MLB history to collect 100 plus strikeouts, 30 plus saves, and have an ERA under 1 in the same year, with his .78 ERA being the lowest for a pitcher ever with at least 80 innings pitched. The dude was a dog. But in 2019, he was back to being crappy, and the Nationals were able to not feel bad about trading him, considering they won the World Series in the process. But yeah, all of a sudden he sucked again, giving up more home runs than total runs he gave up the year before and 22 less innings pitched, more than quadrupled his total earned run count from the year before. His walk rate shot up almost 3 points. I mean, he went from a complete disaster from a hitter's standpoint to the complete opposite. After the year, he was non-tendered by the A's, meaning they didn't care to pick up his contract, and he was now getting that Andy Davis treatment, not wanting to be played with anymore by Oakland. And that's when the Dodgers came calling to sign a Blake Treinen who seemed back to square one despite being just a single year removed from one of the greatest seasons ever for a reliever, giving him a 1-year, $10 million contract. And in 2020, Treinen showed some flashes of his 2018 version, but wasn't anything particularly special, and he didn't really strike many hitters out. But then again, you can only take 2020 with a grain of salt, as everything came with a smaller sample size. Everyone was limited, so Treinen only threw 25 innings that season. But it was 2021 where I wouldn't say he was back to his prime Oakland form, but pretty damn close to it. He threw 72 innings that year, raised his strikeout stuff back up about 3 whole points higher than 2020, just a half point behind his 2018 strikeout rate, and his ERA was 1.99, so he was kind of back to being a dog. I mean, not kind of, he was a dog again. And then the asshole injury bug had to come out of nowhere and bite him. He started having shoulder soreness early in 2022 that shut him down for the first half of the year, a first half that still featured the Dodgers willing to keep him aboard and give him some money, agreeing to a 2-year extension. And even though he'd come back late in the year, he'd throw just 5 innings and go right back to what's become the most sought out list in Hollywood next to the Diddy Party list. the injured list. And it only got worse because he'd end up having to get surgery to fix his effed up shoulder, something that had a 10-month recovery, meaning a completely lost 2023. And just when he was on his way back to begin the year back in the Dodger bullpen for 2024, after missing the entirety of 2023, a line shot during a spring training game would bruise his lung. Arm issues were so last year, he was inventing new ways for pitchers to get hurt. I mean, bro could just not catch a break. He had to miss the whole first month because of his lung, but came back in May to finally be what was expected as a reliable bullpen arm for the Dodgers for the first time in 3 years. And it just so happened to be the best year for this to be the case, considering the Dodgers ended up needing every last bit of any arm they could possibly get. Nobody, at least from a pitching standpoint, was more beat up than the Dodgers this year. Left and right, guys were dropping like flies. The replacements for the main guys then would get hurt. I mean, it was a disaster. But Blake Treinen, he was back to being a dog. Now, was he the dog that could go multiple innings? No, not really. So it's not necessarily like you could bank your entire season and the most important game of the year on him going multiple innings. Foreshadow, but he was still a dog. He threw 46 innings during the season and picked up right where he left off, pitching to a 1.93 ERA with his best strikeout stuff since 2018, even better than 2021, although he threw a lot more innings that year. But Treinen was a really valuable arm for Dave Roberts to use in the back end of that bullpen all year long, and he only continued to dominate throughout the entire postseason run. Now, a big thing that I noticed, just for me simply watching Treinen as a Dodger compared to when he was in Oakland, a big difference that I noticed is the usage of his slider. He's always had a slider and used it throughout his whole career, but he didn't use it quite as much, I think, in Oakland or ever until he became a Dodger. And it's gotten to a point where he uses it even more than his sinker, just about the same. No, actually more, because I ended up looking at the stats just to confirm what I was seeing just from watching. And it's true. In 2018, he used his sinker 50% of the time and only threw his slider / sweeper 22% of the time. 3 years later in 2021, it was completely different. He threw his sweeper the most out of any pitch at 35%, and his sinker wasn't even his second most thrown pitch. That was his cutter at 30%. He threw his sinker 27% of the time in 2021. And this past year, he put his cutter more on the back burner and used his sinker 34% of the time, but still favored his sweeper more than he ever did in Oakland or with the Nationals, and threw it 39% of the time in 2024. So I find that kind of interesting. He's changed the way he goes about pitching at least a little bit, and his slider or sweeper, I guess you can call it, is just nasty, just like his sinker is. And this goes back to the fact that Treinen's always had some of the nastiest stuff in all of baseball. I mean, it really doesn't get any filthier than what he throws. I think he's just had trouble at certain times having a feel for it, not knowing exactly how to throw his pitches, and that's when he can get himself into trouble, leaving pitches out over the plate. And big leaguers, of course, are not going to let you get away with that. But when he has a feel for his pitches, specifically his sinker and slider, I mean, there's really nothing you can do against him. And during the postseason, Treinen wasn't perfect by any means, but he was mostly really good. He didn't allow his first run until the very last game of the NLCS against the Mets, but it didn't even matter at that point because it was in a blowout. But the World Series is where things got a little tougher for Treinen. He did get the winning game 1, but he also gave up a run in the process. He gave up the go-ahead run in the 10th before Freddie Freeman said, "I got you," and then almost blew game 2 before Alex Vesia came in to save his ass. So Treinen was far from sharp at this point, and he also wasn't sharp in his final outing, which came in game 5, but that was honestly the best part about it. He was clearly not on his A game, and he's also not someone who can necessarily be counted on to go more than just 1 inning, like I said. In fact, he hadn't done that since June of 2019. That was the last time Blake Treinen threw 2 innings in an outing, and here he was in Game 5 of the World Series, a game that the Dodgers are just hanging on by a thread. He gets a 1-2-3 7th inning with a couple of punch-outs before the Dodger offense clutched up to get the lead, and Treinen would go out there, now with the lead, get Juan Soto out, and despite getting into some serious trouble with an Aaron Judge double and a walk to Jazz Chisholm, Treinen stayed out there, and Dave Roberts and the Dodgers completely threw analytics out the window in this moment and decided to just go with guts and hope. Treinen gets Stanton out, and Roberts, who originally planned to pull Treinen here, decided not to after Treinen didn't make eye contact with him, and Freddie Freeman at first kind of waved him off.
After he gets Stanton to pop up, Mook, I'm waiting for him to look at me because there's only 1 pitch, but I did tell him 1 hitter, and so he didn't look at me. Because if he looked at me, I was going to go get him. He did not look at me. I'm on the top step, and then Freddie is at first base, subtly, respectfully moving his glove like, let him get him, let him get him.
Oh, wow.
Let him
So
get
Freddie
him.
played a part in this.
So Freddie played a part in this. And then, so you know what? I looked at Freddie. Blake didn't look at me, and I go, the right decision is to stand down and let him get him. It's more of a feel thing.
Okay.
It's more of a feel thing. And I just felt that, and no disrespect to anybody else, I just felt in that moment we were going to live or die with Blake Treinen on the mound, and I had to trust him.
All hands on deck now. You roll with your guy in the heat of the moment, whether it seems smart or not, and Treinen did the damn thing, striking out Anthony Rizzo to end the inning, preserve the lead, and get the win in the clincher. 42 pitches, 2 innings, just laying it all out there. And for who this guy is, the journey he's taken to get here, not having much faith from teams, bouncing around, struggling, finding his groove just to struggle again, find his groove again just to get hurt, and then get hurt again. And after all of that, for him to keep grinding and become one of the most important pieces of a Dodger championship, that's inspiring stuff. And I mean, there's no way the Dodgers win it all without him. No shot. They needed everything they could get, and Treinen ended up being a blessing in a year full of what seemed like a cursed pitching staff. So yeah, this man deserved his own video, so I gave him one. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for watching.